You are standing at the counter. The salesperson slides a watch across the glass, the kind that costs more than some people's cars, and the person beside you, the one who could buy the whole case without checking a balance, gives a small shake of the head and walks out. No watch, no box, nothing. That reaction confuses people because we assume the wealthier you get, the more you buy. Yet the quietly wealthy retirees in America did the opposite. They stopped buying the very things everyone else is still chasing. These are 10 of them. So what do they understand that the rest of us keep missing? It comes down to one idea that runs underneath every item on this list. The people who stay rich learn to tell the difference between what looks like wealth and what actually creates it. That is the whole game. Almost everything marketed to us is engineered to drain the second one while imitating the first. The shiny object whispers that you have finally arrived, even as it quietly sets your real progress back by years. Once you can see that line clearly, these 10 choices stop sounding like deprivation and start sounding like the most obvious decisions in the world. None of them require a high income. Every one of them requires a clear head. Some will sting a little because you may recognize your own habits inside them. That sting is the useful part. Keep in mind, too, that none of these people are misers. They are not skipping joy or hoarding pennies in a jar. They spend freely on the things that genuinely matter to them, on experiences, on family, on time. What they have done is build a quiet filter, a way of separating the purchases that buy a real life from the purchases that only buy the appearance of one. That filter is the entire skill, and it can be learned at any age, on any salary. And by the end, you may notice that the single thread connecting all 10 is something almost no one was ever taught. Number 1, the brand new car. Walk onto any dealership lot and the math goes invisible on purpose. The sticker is exciting, the smell is intoxicating, and the monthly payment is engineered to sound survivable. The average new vehicle in the United States crossed just past $50,000 in late 2025, a record high, and the moment you drive it off the lot, it begins shedding value faster than almost anything else you will ever own. Industry data puts the first-year loss at roughly 20%. Over 5 years, a typical new car gives back around 60% of what you paid. Run that forward on a $50,000 vehicle and the picture turns harsh. You lose something close to $10,000 in the first 12 months alone, and roughly $30,000 by the time year 5 rolls around. That is not a payment for transportation. That is value quietly evaporating in your driveway while you sleep. You financed it, you insured it at a rate that climbs with the car's worth, you fueled it and maintained it, and at the end of it, all you are left holding a thin fraction of the price you so proudly signed for. Wealthy retirees see that depreciation curve for exactly what it is, and they let someone else absorb the steepest part of it. The average used vehicle runs near $25,000, and a car that is 3 or 4 years old has already swallowed the worst of the hit while losing almost none of its usefulness. The engine does not know it is no longer new. So they buy lightly used, they buy reliable brands with a long track record, and then they do the part that quietly builds the most wealth of all. They keep it 10 years, sometimes 12 or more. A paid-off car sitting in the driveway is one of the most underrated wealth tools in the entire country because every single month without a payment is a month that money flows somewhere better. This is the part almost everyone misses. The cost of a car is never just the price on the window. It is the price plus the interest on the loan, plus the insurance that scales with the value, plus everything that money could have earned if it had been invested instead. A fresh new car every 5 or 6 years, financed on a permanent loop, can quietly cost a household its entire comfortable retirement all on its own, one trade-in at a time. The wealthy choose the boring path on purpose, and the boring path compounds in their favor for decades while everyone else keeps starting the loan clock over again. Consider two neighbors who earn the very same paycheck. One buys a new vehicle every 5 years and almost always has a car payment hanging over the household. The other buys a 3-year-old car, drives it for a decade, and invests the payment they are no longer making. After 30 years of identical incomes, those two driveways look the same from the street, but the bank accounts behind them are not even in the same universe. The car was never the difference. The decision about the car was. Number 2, the luxury status symbol. Now back to that watch on the counter, because it explains more than any spreadsheet ever could. There is a stubborn myth that rich people are forever surrounded by glittering, expensive things at every turn. The research on actual accumulated wealth tells a far quieter story. A great many people with serious money drive ordinary cars, live in ordinary neighborhoods, wear ordinary clothes, and would never dream of spending 5 figures on a wristwatch whose only real function is to announce to strangers that they can. The reason is simple once you hear it said out loud. A status purchase delivers a brief jolt of pride and a long tail of carrying costs. The badge does not appreciate for the overwhelming majority of buyers. It needs insuring. It invites comparison. And worst of all, it triggers a chain reaction, because the expensive watch wants an expensive car parked beside it, and the expensive car wants an address that matches its image, and the address wants furniture worthy of the address. One small signal becomes an entire lifestyle, and the lifestyle quietly devours the very freedom the money was supposed to purchase in the first place. This is the trap people fall into right after a windfall, a raise, or a strong year. The spending rises to meet the income, and the security never arrives. The genuinely wealthy figured out something the entire luxury market is built to make you forget. The point of having money is not to look like you have it. The point is the deep, unglamorous calm that comes from never needing a single other person to know. They let the logo go, and they keep the freedom, and they almost always end up with more of both than the people performing wealth all around them. Think about that for a moment, because it quietly inverts nearly everything advertising has ever told you about success. The person with the flashiest watch in the room is very often the one with the thinnest cushion sitting behind it, and the unbothered person in the plain jacket is the one who could actually write the check. There is a quiet term for this among people who study how fortunes are kept rather than spent. They call it stealth wealth. What they are quietly after is freedom, plain and unannounced, and freedom does not photograph well, so the market rarely bothers trying to sell it to you. What gets sold instead is the costume of arrival, and the costume is always rented, never owned. Number 3, extended warranties. You have heard the pitch at every checkout counter and every dealership finance office in the country. For just a little extra, we will protect your purchase. It sounds responsible. It sounds like the grown-up thing to do. And in the overwhelming majority of cases, it is one of the most dependable ways ever invented to hand a company free money. An extended warranty is simply a form of insurance, and insurance only makes financial sense when the loss would genuinely hurt you. The seller knows precisely how often the product fails, precisely what the repair costs, and precisely how to price the plan so that on average, they collect far more than they will ever pay back out. That gap between what you pay and what they expect to return is the entire business model, and it is wide on purpose. You are buying a small chance of a modest repair at a guaranteed premium, and the odds are deliberately arranged so that most buyers never come out ahead. The pleasant feeling of being protected is the actual product on the shelf. The protection itself is usually thin, hedged with fine print, and forgotten by the time anything breaks. Walk it through with a simple example. You buy a television, and the clerk offers a 3-year protection plan for $100. If that television fails outside the standard warranty, you would have paid to repair or replace it anyway. And the plan only helps in the narrow window where it breaks at just the wrong time, in just the covered way, with the receipt in hand. The company sells that plan to thousands of people. Only a sliver ever collect. The rest simply funded the sliver, plus a healthy profit on top. Multiply that across a lifetime of appliances, phones, and gadgets, and the pattern becomes impossible to unsee. Wealthy retirees do something that feels backwards until you sit with it for a second. They self-insure the small stuff. If a blender quits or a laptop stumbles 2 years in, they simply repair or replace it from a modest cushion they keep on hand for exactly that kind of moment. What they flatly refuse to do is pay a stranger an ongoing premium to carry a risk they can comfortably absorb themselves. They reserve their real insurance dollars for the events that could genuinely break them. A house burning down, a serious illness, a lawsuit that targets everything they own. Those catastrophic life-altering risks get insured to the hilt, without hesitation. Everything small and survivable they shoulder on their own. Spread across a lifetime of purchases, quietly declining hundreds of little warranties adds up to real money that stays invested and working instead of vanishing into a corporation's profit margin one checkout line at a time. Number 4. The whole life policy they were sold instead of the coverage they actually needed. This one deserves real care, because life insurance matters enormously when other people depend on your income. The trap here is not protection itself. The trap is being steered into the most expensive, most commission-heavy version of it under the comforting banner of doing something clever with your money. Cash value policies, the kind frequently marketed as whole life or universal life. Blend insurance together with a savings or investment component, and they carry premiums that can run many times the cost of simple term coverage for the very same death benefit. A large slice of those early premiums goes toward commissions and internal fees rather than into anything that actually grows for you. The glossy illustrations handed across the table look impressive, full of gentle upward curves stretching out for decades. The reality in the early years is often weak returns, steep surrender charges if you try to leave, and a product so layered and complicated that even the person who bought it struggles to explain what they truly own. Complexity in financial products almost always favors the seller. There is an old saying among advisors who actually have your interest at heart. If you cannot explain in one plain sentence what a product does and how it makes money, you should not own it. Whole life policies routinely fail that test, and that failure is built right into the design. People who manage money well tend to do the plain, unexciting thing instead. They buy term insurance to cover the specific years their family is most vulnerable, the mortgage years and the children at home years, and that coverage costs a small fraction of the bundled product for the very same protection. Then they take the enormous difference in premium and invest it themselves in low-cost funds they fully control and fully understand. Protection lives over here. Investing lives over there. Two clean separate jobs rather than one tangled contract with a salesperson's incentive baked into every single payment. By the time they reach retirement, the term policy has done its quiet work and gracefully expired, and the invested difference has grown into something substantial. Instead of being trapped for decades inside a contract that was designed from the very first page to be difficult and costly to ever walk away from. Number 5, high-fee, actively managed funds. This is the one that hides in plain sight because the cost feels almost invisible while the damage is almost total. When you put money into a fund, you pay an expense ratio, a yearly slice of your entire balance that comes out whether the fund wins, loses, or does absolutely nothing at all. Actively managed funds, the ones run by a manager promising to beat the market. charge well over 0.5% a year on average. A plain index fund that simply mirrors the whole market often charges less than 0.1%. The difference sounds laughably small when you say it out loud. It is anything but small once time gets involved. Here is the part the wealthy obsess over, while everyone else shrugs and signs. Over the past decade, roughly 2 out of every 3 actively managed funds failed to beat the very index they were trying to outsmart. So you are paying a steep premium for a product that, more often than not, quietly underperforms the cheaper and simpler alternative sitting right next to it on the shelf. You are paying extra for the privilege of doing worse. And that fee does not just cost you once. It is skimmed off the top of your balance every year, compounding against you for the entire time your money stays invested, which in a lifetime of saving means decades of slow, silent bleeding. Put real numbers on it, and the abstraction disappears completely. Take $100,000 growing at a normal long-term rate over 25 years. The gap between paying that higher active fee and paying the rock-bottom index fee comes out to close to $65,000. That is the kind of figure that makes accountants wince. $65,000 silently lifted out of your future in exchange for performance that usually trails the plain market anyway. This decision seems small at the time. It is not. The people who retire wealthy treat fees the way a careful captain treats a slow leak below the waterline. They find it, they seal it, and they refuse to keep paying for the privilege of underperformance year after year after year. A single percentage point, left unexamined, can quietly cost you a decade of saving. The strangest part is how cheerfully the fee is paid. People will drive across town to save a few dollars on groceries, then hand over tens of thousands across their lifetime to a fund that trails the market without ever once reading the expense ratio. The number is printed right there in the documents. It just never feels urgent because it never shows up as a bill. It is simply quietly absent from your balance year after year. A withdrawal you never see leave. Number 6, the biggest house they can afford. There is a strong instinct, especially after a lifetime of hard work, to reward yourself with more house, more square footage. The dream kitchen. The extra bedrooms for guests who realistically visit twice a year. The bank tells you the number you qualify for, and that number is almost always far larger than what is actually wise, because a house is the rare purchase that keeps charging you long, long after you have signed for it. A bigger home means a bigger everything attached to it. Higher property taxes that climb right along with rising values. Higher insurance, especially as premiums surge across much of the country. A heavier maintenance burden because roofs, heating and cooling systems, plumbing and repairs all cost more on a larger footprint. The common rule of thumb puts yearly upkeep at a meaningful slice of a home's value, and that quiet bill arrives every single year whether you budgeted for it or not. The house you bought to enjoy slowly becomes a house you are quietly employed by, and it does not pay you a salary. For a retiree living on a relatively fixed income, an oversized home can gradually turn into a beautiful cage. Look at the backdrop for a moment. The cost of living raise on Social Security for the year 2026 came in at 2.8%, nudging the average retired worker's benefit to a little over $2,000 a month. That is a modest cushion against the rising cost of nearly everything, and a too large home can swallow it whole before the month is even half over. Property taxes do not retire when you do. Insurance does not pause because your income did. The 4-bedroom house that felt like a triumph at 50 can feel like a quiet anchor at 75. On top of that, the average 65-year-old today is projected to spend a staggering amount on health care alone across retirement. A single retiree is looking at roughly $170,000, and a couple closer to $345,000, none of which leaves much room for heating empty guest rooms nobody walks into. So the wealthy do something the broader market treats as a step backwards. They right-size on purpose without apology. Some downsize into a home that genuinely fits the life they actually live now, freeing up trapped equity and slashing their carrying costs in a single move. Others simply stay put in the modest place they paid off years ago and flatly refuse to trade up just because a lender cheerfully says they can. Either way, the money that would have gone toward heating rooms nobody enters flows instead toward the things that make later life genuinely rich. Travel, time with the people they love, the freedom to say yes when it actually matters and no when it does not. They understand, deep in their bones, that a house is meant to shelter your life, not slowly become the thing your entire life ends up serving. If this is the kind of breakdown you want more of, take 1 second and subscribe. This channel digs into the real mechanics of building and keeping wealth every single week. No hype and no shortcuts, just the math laid out plainly. Now to a sales pitch so seductive that millions of otherwise careful people sign their names before they have done a shred of the arithmetic. Number 7, the timeshare. The presentation is always built to charm you from the first handshake. A beautiful resort, a free dinner or a deeply discounted stay, a warm and relentlessly friendly host, and the glowing promise of wonderful vacations for the rest of your life. What almost nobody calculates while sitting in that room, with the host smiling and a subtle clock ticking in the background, is what those vacations will actually cost once the ink dries. And the answer keeps climbing year after year after year with no ceiling in sight. The average annual maintenance fee on a timeshare reached around $1,500 in 2024. And in just a single year, those fees jumped more than 17%, far outpacing ordinary inflation. Stretch that across a typical span of ownership, and the math turns genuinely brutal. Industry estimates place the maintenance fees alone at more than $40,000 over 20 years, and that figure does not even include the original purchase price, or the special assessments that land in your mailbox without warning whenever a roof needs replacing or a hurricane rolls through the property and the resort decides the owners should pay for it. The cruelest feature is woven right into the design. Those fees never stop. Pay the timeshare off completely, celebrate the milestone, and the bills simply keep arriving, year after year. Whether you set foot on the property or not, whether you can still travel or not, whether you are 85 and would rather stay home. And when owners finally try to escape the obligation, they make a painful discovery. The resale market is close to worthless, with countless timeshares listed for a single dollar by people desperate just to end the relentless annual drain. You thought you were buying a lifetime of vacations. What you actually inherited was a liability that follows you and sometimes follows your children for decades. Wealthy retirees almost never go near them. When they want a beautiful week somewhere warm, they simply rent the exact place they want, in the exact week they want it, and they owe absolutely nothing the moment they check out and close the door behind them. Total freedom, total flexibility, and not a single contract clinging to them for the rest of their lives. They keep the vacation and refuse the leash. Run the comparison honestly. The money a family might sink into a timeshare over 20 years, the purchase price plus all those climbing fees, could fund a great many genuinely luxurious vacations booked freely anywhere they chose with nothing owed afterward. The timeshare does not save you money on travel. It locks you into a single resort, a rigid week, and a bill that outlives your interest in ever going back. You would think someone in that sales room would warn the buyers about the fees that never end. By design, no one ever does. Number 8, the newest gadget on release day. Every year, the same ritual returns like clockwork. A new phone, a new tablet, a slightly thinner laptop, all wrapped in a glittering launch event engineered with surgical precision to make last year's perfectly functional device suddenly feel like a relic from another era. The upgrade is rarely about genuine need. It is about a carefully manufactured itch, and millions of people scratch at the instant the product drops, very often financing the shiny new thing on top of every other payment they are already juggling, paying interest on a phone long after a newer one has replaced it. The quietly wealthy sit the whole ritual out, year after year, without a flicker of anxiety about it. Not because they cannot afford the newest model, but because they flatly refuse to pay what amounts to an early adopter tax. They let a device do its full job for years before even thinking about a replacement, and when they finally do upgrade, they tend to buy a model or two behind the bleeding edge, after the price has fallen and the early glitches have been quietly patched by everyone who could not wait. The phone still makes the calls. The laptop still does the work. The tablet still streams the show on the same screen. And the difference in price still goes straight into the market where it grows instead of obsolescing. On any single purchase, this looks like a tiny, almost trivial habit, the kind nobody would bother to mention. Repeated across decades and across every category of gadget a modern household buys. It becomes a steady river of money flowing toward their future instead of toward a line outside a store on a cold launch morning. The newest thing was never the real prize. What they were quietly protecting was the freedom that comes from refusing to be managed by somebody else's marketing calendar. The same logic spills into everything around the gadget. The newest television, the trendiest kitchen appliance, the smart device that solves a problem nobody actually had. The pattern is always identical. A want gets dressed up as a need, a launch date manufactures urgency, and a financing offer removes the last bit of friction standing between you and the purchase. The wealthy simply pause at that exact moment, ask whether the old one still works, and almost always discover that it does. Number 9. Lottery tickets and the get-rich-quick bet. The lottery does not really sell tickets. It sells a feeling, and that feeling is hope. For a couple of dollars, you get to spend a few minutes imagining a completely different life, and there is genuinely nothing wrong with an occasional daydream at the gas station. The problem begins the moment the daydream hardens into a weekly habit. Per capita lottery spending in the United States now tops $300 a year, and the heaviest players, the ones who buy ticket after ticket week after week, average somewhere around $2,500 annually. A painful share of that spending pours out of the households that can least afford to lose a single dollar of it. Look squarely at the odds and the spell breaks fast. The chance of hitting a major jackpot sits near 1 in 292 million. To put that in plain human terms, you are statistically far more likely to be struck by lightning than to ever walk up and collect that grand prize. But the ticket price was never the real cost. What that steady stream of money could have quietly become over the years is where the true damage lives. Take that $2,500 a year and invest it patiently at a normal long-term market rate, and over 25 years, it grows into more than $150,000. The lottery dangles a fantasy with nearly impossible odds. Compounding offers something close to a near certainty, just slower, far quieter, and nowhere near as thrilling on a Wednesday night under the lights. People who build durable wealth understand the difference between a bet and a plan down in their bones. They do not gamble their future on a 1 in millions miracle because they are far too busy executing the unexciting strategy that genuinely works. They buy assets rather than tickets. They let time and compounding carry the heavy load on their behalf, and they sleep soundly at night because their entire future never once depended on a set of numbers being pulled out of a machine on live television. Hope is a fine feeling. It is a terrible financial plan. The same instinct shows up far beyond the corner store. In the friends can't miss venture, the hot tip overheard at a party, the coin or stock that supposedly only goes up. Every one of them sells the same shortcut. The feeling that you might leap the line and skip the patient, unglamorous decades that wealth actually requires. The people who make it rarely take that leap because they already know the line is the strategy. Slow is not the obstacle. Slow is the whole method. Number 10. A carried credit card balance. This is quite possibly the most expensive habit in modern American life, and it disguises itself beautifully as simple convenience. Credit cards are extraordinary tools when handled correctly. Handled incorrectly, they become one of the fastest and most efficient wealth destroyers ever invented. The average credit card interest rate now sits around 21%, and as a country, Americans are carrying more than $1.2 trillion in card balances. That is not just a number on an economist's chart somewhere far away. That is a staggering torrent of money flowing every single month out of ordinary households and straight into the pockets of lenders. Carry a balance of $5,000 at that kind of rate, and you hand over roughly $1,000 a year purely in interest before you have knocked down a single dollar of what you actually bought. You are effectively renting money at a punishing price, and the longer you carry that balance, the more the debt compounds against you. It is the exact same relentless force that quietly builds wealth for the patient investor, simply running in reverse and pointed directly at you. Every month you carry it, the bank earns what should have been yours. The wealthy treat the credit card as a payment tool and nothing more than that. They use it for the rewards, the fraud protection, and the simple convenience of not carrying cash, and then they pay the statement in full every single month, every time. So they never surrender a cent of interest to anyone. The card works for them rather than the other way around. That one quiet discipline, paying the balance in full and never letting it linger overnight, is one of the clearest dividing lines on earth between the households that steadily build wealth and the households that quietly bleed it out month after month while wondering where it all went. There is a reason the people with the most money are so often the very same people who owe the least. So step back for a moment and look at all 10 of these together. The brand new car, the status watch, the warranties, the bundled insurance policy, the high-fee funds, the oversized house, the timeshare, the launch day gadget, the lottery ticket, and the carried balance. On the surface, they appear to have almost nothing in common with one another. Underneath the surface, they are the very same decision made 10 different ways. Each one quietly trades a piece of your future for something that merely looks like wealth in the present moment. And the people who end up genuinely, durably secure are simply the ones who learned, somewhere along the way, to stop making that trade. Not once, in a burst of willpower, but over and over as a quiet default. And that is the encouraging part of all of this. A default can be rebuilt. You do not need a windfall or a lucky break or a higher salary to start refusing the trades that quietly drain you. You need only to see them clearly, the way the people on the other side of that jewelry counter learn to see them. The watch goes back in the case, and a future goes into the account instead. What ties every single item on this list together is not iron discipline or natural frugality or some rare gene for saying no to nice things. It is understanding. Once you truly grasp how money actually behaves, how it compounds, how fees silently erode it, how depreciation and interest work patiently against you in the dark, these choices stop feeling like sacrifices and start feeling completely obvious. The retirees who refuse to buy these 10 things are not depriving themselves of a good life. They are buying the best thing money can purchase, which is the freedom to stop worrying about it. They simply see the entire board laid out in front of them, and the uncomfortable truth is that most people were never once taught how to see it. That right there is the real gap, and it quietly sits behind every other gap in personal finance. It has nothing to do with income, and even less to do with luck. There is no private secret here that only the rich are allowed to know. It is the basic foundational understanding of how money truly works. The kind of grounding that turns every future decision from a stressful guess into an easy one. Every habit on this entire list traces directly back to it. If that foundation has never been properly laid out for you, in plain language, from the ground up, then that is the natural place for any money journey to begin. Long before the budgeting apps and the hot stock tips and all the rest of the noise out there clamoring for your attention. It is the quiet starting point that makes every other piece finally fall into place, and there is a full walkthrough of exactly that foundation waiting for you. The financial literacy that silently holds up every single thing you just heard. Because in the end, the wealthy did not arrive there by buying all the right things. They arrived there by understanding, clearly and early, which things were never worth buying at all.